And scan this QR code and start entering your questions for us. Let me see. And so what we'll do a little different this go round that we didn't do before is that we're going to keep this QR code up for you all instead of showing you all the questions live, okay? All righty, well, let's start with question number 1. Let's start with a simple one. I'm gonna throw it to you, Dalton. We always get this one. Why is the free tier capped at 5 nodes, and will this ever be raised for education or certification usage?
Yeah, it was our first pass to put us at 5 nodes. We had to make a balance between our CML personal and personal plus offers, plus what we offer for free. That said, we've been doing some polling around what the ideal node count should be. So that might change in the future, especially since we started adding the ability of Docker containers. So we're taking a close look at that and kind of analyzing how that might look in the near future.
Thank you for that, Dalton. And you all don't be shy. Go ahead and begin to submit your questions for us. Okay, and I have another question. Is there or will there ever be any consideration for an all-in-one installer that removes the VM setup complexity? Would anyone like to take that one?
Sorry, an all-in-one installer?
Yes. Are we considering or will we ever consider an all-in-one installer that removes the VM setup complexity?
I mean, Cisco Modeling Labs is under the hood using Linux KVM to run the virtual machines, and then Docker engine to run the Docker containers, and then a bunch of our own software there. But that's all kind of designed to run on Linux KVM. So if you don't want the virtual machine, you essentially need to have a Linux box configured the way CML wants it. So we ship an ISO installer. If you had, for example, a dual boot system, you could just use that to install CML. You'd essentially end up with a Ubuntu 24.04 server with all the CML software installed and running. We don't currently ship just like a package that you'd install on Linux, partially because ensuring that environment is correct and not broken is more complicated if it's just installed on a random Linux box. So it's we ship it as an installer that just installs the full system bare metal, including all the packages and software we need. But yeah, it's not a piece of software designed to run just on a Windows box or something. Like the reason that virtualization layer they're running it on Hyper-V, for example, is because that base layer for CML is actually Linux. The software is built to run on Linux, and the simulation runs on a Linux system using the KVM hypervisor. So if we're not running on just a bare metal Linux server, we need that virtualization layer because what you're getting is actually our software, the web app, and all that. But underneath that is sort of all the guts that runs the simulation, and that is designed to run on a Ubuntu Linux system on the KVM hypervisor. So yeah, we don't expect to have sort of a lightweight installer for just popping it on like a Windows box or something. It's always going to need to deploy in its current design, it needs to deploy a Linux virtual machine. We've discussed other ideas for architectural changes, but those would be very big changes to the core of the system. So we don't make that step lightly.
Okay, thank you for that. Our next question is, can CML automatically generate network configurations?
Yeah, great question. And short answer is yes. There is actually a means in there today that you can generate some basic configuration. You go to the nodes and you say apply configure. I can't remember the exact wording. It's in there, but it's not to the point Tom knows. Tom's going to jump in.
Build initial configs, I think, is the
Build initial
label.
configs. However, one of the features we used to have back in Viral was called Auto Netkit, and it could do more advanced things, some routing, some BGP, maybe a little MPLS here and there. One of the things I've been playing with, and I just put a blog out on it, is called Model Context Protocol, which is connecting AI, AI, yay, we check the box, to CML. Now, here's a cool thing you can do. Some of these models out there, like Claude, GPT, some of the more advanced models, GPT 4 into 5, have a really good understanding. And by understanding, I mean they've been trained on a lot of network configuration data. And using this MCP connector, MCP server as it's called, you can have these models create somewhat complex configurations in CML with just your natural language describing it. In the blog article, and we'll post the link in the chat, I show OSPF. So you can say, connect, create a topology or a lab with these nodes, 5, 6, whatever, and connect them in this way, or just connect them, and then say, I want OSPF area 0 on these nodes, or I just want OSPF to be configured. And it will configure that in a certain way, and you can keep chatting with it to get to the configuration you want without having to apply any configuration yourself. So there are options. I don't think we're going to see something like Auto Netkit as a feature come back into CML, especially now where we are trying to connect CML more with these large language models and generative AI. And it's not that you have to have accounts with things like Anthropic or with ChatGPT. There are free tools like LM Studio that if you have some local, like a local GPU in your laptop, you can take advantage of that same MCP connector and do some of that chat-driven communication, if you will, to generate the configs that you want in your network.
I should also mention that there's some people inside of Cisco who, so we did not bring the full AutoNet kit over into CML 2.0. I mean, the original sort of, that was the brainchild of Simon Knight, and he was instrumental in the CML 2.0 design. And part of what we were finding in the 1.x version was that people were either misunderstanding what AutoNet Kit could do, or they were kind of using it when they didn't need to, or they were using it, but they weren't using any of the power that was kind of built in there. So what he wanted to do is kind of scale it way back and then just see from feedback kind of what things people need help with that sort of auto configuration generation. And really in the last 5 years since we went to CML 2.0, we've had very few requests about anything with config generation. So we'll have more questions, then we're willing to kind of receive those. But we also have coming out for basic IP addressing, there's already some package, open source package that somebody's created and pushed out years ago, just to take a CML lab and generate just IP addresses, not configure it. And then there's a team within Cisco who had the need to create sort of a base layer topology for specific functionality. Like they wanted to test certain features, but to test it, they needed a lab with 6 nodes with OSPF configured, blah, blah, blah. So they didn't want to keep having to do that. I think this was somebody over in like our TAP org maybe. So one of them wrote a tool to kind of do some basic configuration for, I'm trying to remember, I think it covers iOS, XE, maybe XR, and NXOS. But they can basically do that sort of basic config generation for OSPF, BGP, and some other things with small labs, just kind of generating from scratch topology. And I think that Leslie, you're working with that team to kind of do like a blog post or something on that, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so we're going to get that released here in the next few months when that blog post comes out, so that if other people find that useful, they can grab that script and use that to kind of generate some basic configs also.
Thank you, Tom and Joe. Our next question, we hear a lot of questions around this. Can SD access be labbed fully in CML? And then it says everything except CAD Center.
Yes, it can. We have the virtual Catalyst 9KV. Now, I know people are going to jump on me. The Cat 9KV isn't available in CML free. You need personal or personal plus or enterprise or education for that. But that node definition or that device type does exist, and it does have the ability, with admittedly a very limited data plane, to simulate or model a SD access network. Technically, you can also put Catalyst Center in CML. We don't have a node definition for it. It's huge, but the limitations on creating a VM with a certain number of CPUs and memory has been lifted in CML. So technically you could, but we would recommend that you have a Catalyst Center, even if it is a virtual machine Catalyst Center outside of CML, and connect that with external connectivity. But theoretically, you could do it. And everything else, like your Fusion routers, your SDA fabric, all of that can be modeled with CML, at least with CML Personal.
You. Next up, Ramal, this is for you. How often does CML check its licensing status? This customer's planning to keep his system offline and wants to make sure it'll still work.
Yeah, so the CML, I already replied to that question, and the chat, yeah, so the CML personal offerings, it requires the CML instance to talk to the Cisco licensing server every 180 days. So yeah, every 180 days, it will try to reauthorize the license. However, if you have an enterprise or an CML education license, then you have the option to go for offline licensing. So you can take your CML instance completely offline throughout your license term.
I should say that CML actually refreshes and renews its license quite often. I think every day, but yeah, there's some limits on exactly how long it'll let you run while it's offline. If you need to run,
it tries to communicate. It tries to communicate to the license server. Even if it cannot communicate, it will still allow you to run the labs. But I think it will wait till 180 days before it completely stops you from starting labs.
Yeah, and like you said, this is the CML Personal Plus. CML Free does not require any licensing. It doesn't require or check anything. And if you're really wanting to run entirely air gapped, then yeah, you need to purchase CML Enterprise.
Thank you. Next question comes from Chris Dalton. It looks like this is for you. Will clustering be an option with Personal Plus license in the future?
That's to be determined. And overall, we're looking at licensing models holistically from across, free to personal to enterprise. There's a lot of, I think, improvements we can do, and these are things we're discussing actively. So that might be possible in the future, but the licensing model might look a little bit different than how it is today, where it's based on the number of node counts. So stay tuned, but that's something we're still working on internally.
Okay. Next question. Have you considered not counting Docker nodes towards the 20 device limit?
Yeah, it kind of falls in the same realm of questions. I think I talked a little bit about it earlier with our inclusion of abilities to spin up Docker containers as of 2.9. There's been some complaints, and I think there's some validity there. So we're looking at how we want to have containers licensed, if at all. But this is again part of that larger licensing conversation that we're having.
Next question. This is for you, Joe. It says, can I run ICE in CML?
You can. In fact, as of CML 2.9, I believe it was, We ship ICE, not ICE node definition, on the supplemental reference platform ISO. So it's so you can actually run ICE. It's not included with CML free. It's one of the node types you would need with personal or higher, personal plus enterprise education. But it does work. It is one of the larger nodes, just not as big as Catalyst Center, but it is fairly large. We ship the smallest form factor possible. I still think it needs like 12 CPUs. It does require quite a bit and a lot of disk space. But you absolutely can do it. We have people using it today. In fact, day zero config support, so you can bootstrap ICE and automate that. That's also supported.
Okay. Next question. What feature helps visualize node status?
Yeah, I was kind of curious. I asked in the chat if there could be more details of what they're trying to visualize. There is a tab in CML. So if you go to your CML, there's a nodes pane that will show you all of the current status of the nodes and how much resources they're taking. If that's what you're looking at for visualization, the topology map itself, if the nodes are started, you have a little green check mark. If they're and the links are solid. If they're not, the nodes will have like a gray icon on them if they have been started before, and the links will be dashed. If the nodes have never been started, they won't have any of that little badge icon on them, and the links will still be dashed. So those are different ways you can visualize within CML what's going on. We also have a Prometheus exporter if you're looking to get statistics about how CML is being used. That's available in GitHub. It's open source from a monitoring standpoint of the CML server itself. So it's really just what are you trying to visualize exactly, and then there's probably an option we have, or something you could do off box if it doesn't exist out of the box.
Okay. Ramal, this is for you. Is there support for multi-vendor images to run within CML for interoperability testing?
Yeah, so basically it depends on the image, the type of image which we want to test in CML. Technically, every image which supports KVM deployment, which officially supports KVM deployment, should run in CML. So the thing is that we need to refer the official deployment guide of that particular image and understand the various parameters that are required for it to run. For example, the CPU, the RAM, the disk, the network drivers, the disk drivers. So we need to match all that parameters while we create the node definition. And then, yeah, you should be able to upload the image and get it to boot. So so far we have there are certain third-party images which are known to work in CML, and the node definitions for those images are available in the CML GitHub community page. However, we don't provide the image itself, but the node definitions are available in the GitHub community page.
Thank you for that. Our next question, can Cisco learning credits be used to purchase CML Personal or Personal Plus?
Sorry, I was not listening. Was that question for me?
I can answer that one. Yeah, learning credits can be used for Personal and Personal Plus. So CML Personal, it's usually $199 US, which is 2 learning credits. Or you can do the Personal Plus, which is $349, so that's 4 learning credits. So just keep that in mind because you'll have to, I guess, convert to your local currency.
Thank you for that, Dalton. Next question. When we want to connect some of the CML lab devices to an external ICE on Cisco network, how can we have the network reachable? I feel like that's what they're trying to say.
Yeah, I think I replied to that chat. So by default, CML have bridge external connectivity. So if you want the virtual devices inside CML to talk to an external device, bridge external connectivity will be the way to go. So right out of the box, it should work, the bridge external connectivity. And beyond that, we also have the option to add additional interfaces to the CML instance. And we can configure those additional interfaces to a separate bridge connectors, bridge interfaces. And yeah, so those are the different approaches for connecting to an external network. I also shared the links to, so there are a few demo videos by Joe in our training page. So I also shared the link to that page. Yeah.
Thank you for that.
If that question,
Go ahead.
that I think when you read that question, you said something about the Cisco network. If that's somebody who's actually inside of Cisco, they should use the, this is more a customer-facing webinar, but if they're using CML within Cisco, there are some additional internal resources. They should check our SharePoint page and follow from there.
Thank you for that clarification. Next question. It's two parts. First part is what resource is most affected by virtual nodes, and will allocating more cores improve node performance?
You kind of answered yourself, or you led yourself to the right answer to the first one with the second one. Memory or cores are probably, and it depends on the node type. Cores are probably one of the most critical things you can focus on to make your CML experience better. The more physical cores, so hyper-threading doesn't really count when it comes to some of the bigger nodes like the Nexus 9kV or XR 9kV or Cat 9kV. It's really those physical cores in the system that are going to help your CML have a better time. They don't really tend to like, and Dalton posted the sizing calculator, which will give you a perspective of how many, what is the recommended. There's like a minimum and then a recommended number of cores. Memory comes in just second behind that. So having enough memory to be able to run your run the topologies, especially with the bigger iron, the nodes I mentioned, memory is going to matter. Disk space is generally a far third, but there are your I/O performance can have an effect. We've seen in the past, specifically, I think with the Nexus 9kV, a very slow underlying disk has caused problems with that. So while you don't necessarily need gobs of storage, you might with like ICE, having faster storage like SSDs on which the CML server lives, that can help and give you a better experience. But for me, it would go number of physical cores, then memory, then your storage considerations.
Yeah, and it really kind of depends what kind of performance things people are talking about. If it's responsiveness, if it's like just the initial boot up of the nodes and the topology, and especially if those are not consistently coming up, it can be a lot of different things. Storage was one of those cases where if we hit storage problems, it's usually right there at the initial boot up. CPU starvation on that initial boot up is also a pretty common problem. I think CSR 1000V used to just kind of go off into la la land and not stop booting, but never finish booting, and just kind of just sit there idling forever. You'd have to kind of wipe it and restart it. So yeah, I mean, there's a few different ways that performance things can show up in terms of just like the responsiveness. You could see protocol flapping, like once the nodes are up and running, if you're kind of tuned a little too tight for the resources you have available. And sometimes that really just is a matter of hardware versus virtualization. So this is, these are VMs running on shared x86 64 VMs. They're not dedicated boxes with their own like custom ASICs running all this stuff. So you may have to loosen up timers and things. So it depends a little bit about kind of what you're thinking about in terms of performance. If it's things like protocol flapping, then yeah, getting, if you're trying to get like the most out of a CML server, you generally CPU, memory, disk, like Joe said, but then also getting rid of the virtualization layer, because that comes with some overhead, and installing it bare metal on a dedicated server can help. We definitely have problems with running CML with IO intensive node types, with like network attached storage. All this stuff is sort of gets far away from what we normally see from a CML-free use case, but certainly some of our big enterprise customers have had, they're trying to run big, large topologies across a CML cluster, and performance tuning can be a pretty involved process. But yeah, for local like CML-free deployments on like a local machine, probably your biggest bottleneck is going to be your CPU resources.
Thank you for that, Tom. Our next question: does CML include built-in controls or automation that reduce CPU or memory load when labs aren't being actively used? Or does it rely solely on a hypervisor and host system to manage and enforce limits?
So CML has a feature that I bet many don't use, called KSM, that you can turn on in the cockpit interface, which helps dedupe some of the memory. That said, one of the nice things about CML is if you're worried about the resources being used, and you specifically said in your question, when labs aren't being actively used, one of the things you can just do is shut down those labs. The devices don't lose their state, meaning they don't lose their configuration. Their underpinning disks don't go away. So you're not losing anything. Yes, it will take some time for them to reboot. It's not like a pause of them as VMs, but you can do that. You can just shut them down. Okay, I'm not going to work on this BGP lab now. I'm going to go over here and work on this ISIS lab. So you shut the BGP down, work on the ISIS. Okay, I'm done with ISIS, shut it down, BGP. I waited a little bit, but there's all my config, everything. The routes come up, peers come up, that type of thing. So I would say, you can automate all of that. Sure. You can absolutely use the REST API to shut down labs, bring up labs. But you don't need to rely solely on the hypervisor or a feature like KSM. You can be okay with shutting down a lab and getting back to it when you're ready.
Yeah, I mean, this is part of the joy of having a virtual test lab in Cisco modeling labs. Like you don't have like the lab there running, you need it kind of there and all ready to go. It's all kind of based on that disk and the data inside of CML, and you can stop it and have it shut down for a while, and when you're ready to use it again, power it back up and go get a coffee and come back and start labbing.
There you go.
Thank you for that. Next question, we get this often. Custom icons, are they available? Are there custom line types for connections? Solid, dash, different colors?
I don't think we have anything coming for connection. It gets a little difficult around like overloading what connection, what different visual things mean. So yeah, we don't currently do anything with like custom colors or things for the connections. The icon set right now is kind of a fixed set of named icons. That actually is a feature we were working on and should be included in CML 2.10, the ability to have like a SVG custom icon applied to a node type. So if you're bringing a third-party node type, maybe that actually is embedded in the node definition, or you can just swap out an icon on your existing node definitions. So that should be part of the CML 2.10, which will be early 2026.
All right, next question. While working in a complex routing scenario, leveraging a mix of IOL and at KV and CML, we have seen some interesting, in quote, invalid output in some of the routing tables. Is it possible that would be an issue with the IOLs versus Cat 8KVs?
Yeah, I was answering to that question in the chat. Yeah, so we have seen some different behaviors, unexpected behaviors in the iOS XC devices, yeah, meaning the Cat 8K devices. So in CML, by default, Cat 8K node uses the network driver VMXNet. And so in some cases that may not work for a particular for testing a particular scenario. So you may want to try switching the network driver to VirtIO in the node definitions. And yeah, you also need to wipe the node and start it again for the changes to take effect. Beyond that's one issue we have seen sometimes with the Cat 8K, and for the IOL, that is a relatively new image. We have heard some issues here and there, but in general, it should work fine. Yeah, so I would first start with changing the network driver of the Cat 8K node.
Thank you, Ramal. Next question. Are there plans to insert the host name into the telnet links in the breakout tool? Today, Even G does that, and I think it's an easy win for Cisco if we can match this capability. It could negate the need for my first question. Oh, I see the first question. He's referencing, are there plans on making the breakout tool keep the same telnet ports to a specific node and lab?
So,
go ahead, Tom.
I was going to say that the point of the breakout tool is so that you can have consistent ports for a node in a lab. I think part of the point is, and maybe this is not clear, I'd have to look at the documentation again. It's been a while since I've reviewed it. Like, the point of the breakout tool is the first time you spin up the lab, you bring it up, then you have it scan all the devices. Once you set like what ports you want to use, you save that. And then in the future, if you're spinning up that lab, you just load that config with all the same ports that you used last time. So the part of the point of the breakout tool is you want those consistent port numbers, not just have them randomly assigned. So, you know, it'll scan it and put something in there, but you can go and customize all those things so that this lab is using local port 9000 through 9000 whatever, and this other lab I'm using port 10,001 through whatever. So you can do that, and then you save those kind of configs for those labs, but then you need to kind of reload that config file for those devices. Though I think there was some issue. Yeah, there was something kind of weird about the way this works when you're kind of switching between labs. I'd have to look at that again.
Yeah, Tom,
Yeah,
I think when we wipe a lab, I think the port numbers would change, right? So this more on to this question, like I previously answered the same user in the chat. So I was suggesting him to use Patty, where we can permanently add the ports, right? Yeah.
Yeah, Patty's a little more straightforward. It has some restrictions on, like, it needs to be everything in one broadcast domain, and it has some security implications. Like, the breakout tool is letting you connect to local ports, and then those local ports are a secure connection to the CML server, password protected by your credentials to the CML device. The Patty is basically opening ports on the CML server that you're just connecting to, which, you know, for a local system is fine, but yeah, for a more secure environment, it might not be. Yeah, I'd have to test the thing with breakout tool. I remember something around this where we had something that was kind of resetting that shouldn't be, but yeah, the goal and the idea of the breakout tool is basically that you'd be able to kind of persistently have the same ports for the same lab and nodes every time.
Something else to consider, I'll post the link. We have our community, which is a GitHub repository with a lot of things like third-party node definitions, some sample labs, and some contributed scripts. And a couple of them, or a few of them, are around using the breakout tool with terminal emulators like Secure CRT and iTerm2, which allows you to create a set of connection profiles named by the devices in your topology and using the breakout tool. So that can be a good way to kind of combine what's there in the breakout tool with that desire to have the named devices in there, the host names. And like I said, I'll post a link to that. You can check that out if that's one of the tools you're using, Secure CRT or iTerm.
Thank you for that. Next question. There is low bandwidth when I connect my lab to the internet via an external connector. Is there any way to increase the bandwidth, or do all nodes have a limit? If they do have a limit, have you considered increasing it?
Yeah, the documentation we have is pretty good about what we've tested. The data planes of most of our devices in CML are otherwise limited. So CML's fabric provides up to a gig of connectivity, but very few nodes can do that. The nodes like IOSV and IOL have an inherent much smaller limit. Nodes like the CSR and the Cat8kV are license limited to like 1 megabit per second by default. And that in general, you can't increase that. We can't increase that, meaning the CML team. The engineering groups within Cisco that produce those devices, those virtual form factors, they've set that limit, and they've done so either because that's how unfortunately how that underlying architecture works, or that's just what they wanted. With the licensed locked versions or nodes like CSR, Cat8kV, XR9kV, if you have the ability to get a license for those nodes that's independent from CML, you can apply that and you can go up to 10 gig. I mean, you won't get that through the fabric. You can certainly get a much better throughput through the fabric. One of the things I like to do where it's applicable, like say the Nexus 9kV, is connect the management interfaces directly to the external connector so that there's no other CML hops between my physical network and my virtual device. That way I can do things like larger file transfers to individual devices, and I can have multiple external connectors all on the same network to all my devices. So I kind of have like an out-of-band network, and that lets me get a little bit better bandwidth. The minute you put like an IOSV switch or an IOL switch between your external connector and your device, that's when you're going to get that really congested data plane. And like I said, there's really nothing the CML team can do to increase any of those. Some you can do with those licenses, others you're just going to have to deal with that. That's the data plane you get.
Yeah. And in particular, the iOS XRV 9000, if you're using that, it's not part of CML free, but if you're a CML personal user using that one, I think that default bandwidth limit with no licensing is like 500 kbps. It's really small. So people I know have run into some trouble with that, and they just end up switching that out with some other device if that's their router, like right inside their external connector. They'll just switch it out with a CSR or something else that's a little better bandwidth by default.
Thanks for that info. Next question, it's about licenses. Can CML licenses be transferred between servers? If I upgrade hardware, move my installation to another computer or VM, or change hypervisors, is it possible to migrate that CML license to a new system without having to purchase a new license?
Yeah, so the simple answer is yes. CML uses, well, if you're using CML free, there's no license, so there's nothing to transfer. If you're using CML personal and you have a license, or CML enterprise with a licensed instance, then we use smart licensing, Cisco smart licensing. It's common to lots of Cisco products. And your license is associated with that instance. But you'll sometimes see in the documentation, we talk about a CML instance. You've downloaded the CML installer, you installed CML, you license, that is your instance of CML, that's your CML server, you license that. But then if you deregister that license is now free. That's sort of tracked up with the Cisco smart licensing. and you can just register another CML instance if you decide to just destroy this one completely. Your I don't know, a tree falls on your CML server and destroys it. You need to create a new one. You just need to have deregistered that license, and then you can register the license with another instance somewhere else. If you, unfortunately, we've had a few people do something where they're running a CML virtual machine, and they just delete the virtual machine before deregistering it. That license will be held, will still be seen as being in use by the smart license infrastructure. But if you are a CML personal user, you can go to your CML personal page, and there's a button in there under that purchase where you expand. You can see the license registration token. There's also a button to say deregister, like basically free up the license. It's like a deregister button. So the deregister functionality in CML is kind of a best effort. It's actually possible for that to fail. So even if you correctly follow the documentation link we put in the answer and deregister your instance, you still might need to go to that thing and do the deregister. If you have done the deregistration in CML and then you try to like move your instance and register it somewhere else, and you're getting an error that says the things in use are not available, whatever. Yeah, go check either your smart account if you're a CML enterprise customer, or in the CLN store, you can go in and just deregister the instance. It basically, if you do that on a running CML instance, it will stop working at some point once it sees that. But yeah, if you've accidentally like deleted an instance entirely and wiped out the disk before deregistering, there is still even a way to kind of get back the license and use it on another system. So yeah, it's fully transferable. Your license, your one CML personal license, for example, is one instance. You can take it wherever you want it, move it, reinstall it, just deregister before you're done with one instance and moving your license to another.
Thank you. Next question. You see, time check. We got 15 minutes left, so hopefully we can get through these last, looks like 3 to 4 questions. With CML Personal Plus, can TAC assist with issues in running easy SD-WAN deployment? I'm having issues adding edges and haven't gotten far with GitHub questions. Ramal, that sounds like it's for you.
Oh, it's kind of for Ramal. Ramal, you're on mute, by the way. The easy SD-WAN deployment isn't ours. Like we've tested it, it works. I think Joe's used it, but yeah, it's something some other group came up with. We thought it was useful, so we kind of included that and pointed to it. But that is not something that our team maintains. If there's something kind of fundamentally wrong with it, we can try to look at that. But yeah, it is one of these more sort of outside third-party kind of tools for playing with SD-WAN. Go ahead, Ramal.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess the user is already referring about the documentation that we have in our SD-WAN page. I guess, yeah, the EC-WAN deployment. I've tried it some time back. I don't remember the exact details on top of my head, but I've heard customers have successfully deployed it using that tool. So it is supposed to work. And regarding the support, I wonder like if you are relying on the GitHub support page, or I would suggest you to create a discussion in the CML personal community itself. So there are many other personal users who have also successfully deployed SD-WAN. So you'll also get help from them. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a page in the documentation, in the CML documentation that's for support, and it tells you what your kind of support channels are for the different CML offers. And then if you're using some third-party thing like some script or tool that somebody else has developed, somebody got it working at one point, especially if we're pointing to it. We usually have tested it ourselves at least once, but if it's not packaged with CML, it is not necessarily something we test with every single release. So the SD-WAN stuff is pretty new, so I think that should still be working. But other kind of scripts that are outside CML proper, it's best to kind of talk to the community, because those are kind of community contributions, and the community helps kind of support and maintain those.
Thank you. Next question, can authentication be integrated with external directory services? Does CML support connecting user authentication to external systems like LDAP or Active Directory for centralized account management?
Yes.
Absolutely. Not in free and not in personal and not in personal plus, but in enterprise and education, LDAP is a first-class authentication mechanism, and that can be backed by Active Directory or Open LDAP. But you can absolutely do that and map groups and do that. So yes, short answer is you absolutely can do it.
Yeah, the CML dev team uses it all the time, and we've got many customers using it against Active Directory, LDAP backends. Getting the filters configured correctly is a little bit of a trick, but if you're on CML Enterprise, certainly TAC can help with that. They have a lot of experience with that. We're also actually looking at adding sort of a prototype of some radius support in CML 2.10. So, early 2026, if you're looking for radius, look for CML 2.10, upgrade to that one, and see. It'll be a little bit whatever, like an experimental feature. So it's going to be more like go through and configure, like call this API or something. It's not going to be a full class citizen yet, but we're testing out some attempt at a radius support also.
Thank you. And then is DNAC available in free, the 5-device version?
Technically, if you wanted to make it available, you could. DNAC isn't available at all in CML, as I mentioned earlier. We have not created a node definition for it. Not to say that it won't work. There is a VM form factor for DNA Center, Catalyst Center now. So you could theoretically get it in there if you had the resources. And CML free allows you to run up to 5 nodes, and you can use custom nodes. I think Dalton posted something about that in the chat earlier. So if you wanted to, if you had access to the Catalyst Center virtual machine, you had a machine with 256 cores and I think a terabyte of RAM, a little bit more than that. Let's say 258 cores and a terabyte and a quarter of RAM. Maybe not a quarter, terabyte and a tenth. Then you could create a node definition for your Catalyst Center, load that into CML, and that could be one of your 5 nodes that you run. But again, we would recommend that if you have the VM for Catalyst Center, run it separate from CML. Use that external connectivity to allow Catalyst Center to manage or talk to the devices running in CML. Reason being is if you do need to shut down the labs and bring up another lab, you're not waiting for Catalyst Center to boot every time. So you just have that, and that could always be running, and you could use it across multiple labs fairly easily.
Yeah, and it's sort of a strategy that makes sense for a lot of controller type nodes. Especially that controller is not, if you don't think of it as its lifecycle being tied to the network simulation itself. So like DNA Center is over here, it exists, it's got its own kind of lifecycle. It's going to go point at these devices, this lab, or like Joe said, you could use this with multiple different labs. But running that outside of CML with a lot of controller kind of software, it kind of makes sense to say its lifecycle, it has its own lifecycle, its own kind of intelligence, and it can kind of be running even when the lab is entirely down. When the lab's up, it can go point to those devices and do things. So, keeping that outside the lab lets you kind of separate its lifecycle from the lab's start and shut down.
Thank you. And this last question, I feel like it's a statement. We just got one more in, but it says, I believe SD-WAN can be simulated. Yes, it can. And Joe created a video that is available to everyone to view. Go ahead. Did you want to speak to that, Joe?
No, you nailed it. Yeah, it absolutely can. We ship it, and it's on the supplemental ref plat. And you're right. There's a video out there showing how you can use this easy SD-WAN tool to spin up a fabric.
Okay. And then another quick question that came through. Does Cisco publish a roadmap of planned CML features? I'm gonna say kinda, but I'm gonna hand it off to Dalton because I feel like he'll have a more
No,
elaborate answer for you all.
not technically. I mean, when we do our webinars and stuff, we'll sometimes flash our roadmaps and talk about upcoming features, especially for like the most recent or most upcoming release. That said, though, we're working to be kind of more transparent in that realm. I think learning with Cisco in general has tried to be more transparent on what's coming in the roadmap, whether it's new certifications, and in our case, new features for CML. So that might change in the near future on how we actually have that public facing.
Yes. So what I heard Dalton say was stay tuned. We have some things coming around that. Our last question, is there documentation on the resource requirements for running CCIE lab exam samples in CML? I'm in the process of purchasing hardware and would appreciate advice on the best CPU, RAM, and SSD specifications.
So CML itself doesn't include any like CCIE sample labs. So I assume this question is talking about taking other lab samples from like Cisco training or a Cisco press book and running it in CML. So that's going to depend partially on the people who created those labs, whether they are documenting that. I think the easiest thing to do is there is in the documentation in the CML docs, which has been somewhere posted here, but I can post it again on developer.cisco.com. Basically, there's a FAQ there, and in the FAQ, there's the nominal resources. So that's basically what we tell KVM each type of VM can use. So like IOL gets 1 core CPU and 512 gig of, or sorry, IOSB gets 1 core and 512 gig of RAM, mega RAM. So that's sort of a upper limit of what that node type is going to need. Most of the nodes don't constantly consume their full nominal resource limit. So we often there's a resource calculator, which I don't remember if we put that available for download, Dalton, somewhere, but
it is. It's on GitHub, and I just posted the link in the WebEx.
Okay. Yeah, so there's a sizing calculator. Basically, that's just applying those nominal values and then doing some kind of standard, maybe a third of the nominal CPU is going to be kind of required. It does vary a lot depending upon your specific lab and sample, but that'll kind of give you a sense of the upper limit would just be taking all the node types, like I've got a lab with 15 nodes and it's mostly IOL and IOL L2, but there's a few, there's an ASAV, there's something. You can basically just say like how many nodes of each type. Just adding up the nominal resources, like from the CML FAQ, would give you sort of an upper limit on the resources needed by the lab. The resource calculator is going to apply some sort of basically oversubscription of your physical hardware percentages to try to guess what would be kind of a reasonable amount. I think it gives like a min and a max or something, or an average and a max kind of recommendation. The other thing is this is a really good place where I would say, there is a CML community on the Cisco Learning Network. If you go look at the Cisco Learning at Cisco.com under the communities, there's one for Cisco Modeling Labs. It's a good question to ask in there, or search for other people who've talked about that, because I know a lot of people have gone through CCIE and done this kind of work and used CML in the past. I think some of the larger labs, people tend to build a separate like white box server. So, not just running this on like a laptop or something. It's a little too heavyweight for that. Might be better now that we have IOL devices. We used to only have virtual machine form factors for iOS VL2, but now we have IOL, which is more of a container. So it's a lot lighter weight. So that might help with some of those labs. But yeah, it's best to kind of go through, talk to some of the other people who've gone through their CCIE and use CML. They probably have some recommendations about what they ended up building.
Yeah, Tom, probably we should also add that, so if the user just mentioned is planning to purchase hardware, I mean, if the user wants is going the server route and the bare metal installation, probably it's a good idea to go with Intel processors. So because some of the reference platform images have dependency, they work much better with Intel processors. So that would be one other thing to note.
Yeah, until recently, all the Cisco UCS servers were Intel only, and therefore most of the BUs, when they create these VMs, are only testing on Intel processors. And we've had some reports of specific VMs not behaving properly on AMD, especially if you're running a bare metal.
And we are right at time. Really quick, please take a moment, pull your phone out, take a picture of this or grab this QR code. Let us know what you thought. Would you join another one? What you wanted to hear more of? What do you think was missing? Send us any feedback. Take this survey for us. And
Yeah, I was gonna say,
lastly,
if they want to see more of these, then definitely tell us how useful they were and how much you like these, because this is an experiment of doing these office hours for a few months here. So we're deciding whether to continue something like this going forward.
yes, and based on what Tom said, I'll make sure to make a PDF, upload these slides as well, so you all can have these links. There's a link to the CML community as well as the link to the Cisco U training that we told you that has been added to the free learning path. And that's all we have. And thank you so much for joining, and we hope to see you all again.